Dance tango with me and I'll marry you, the billionaire laughed, pointing at the cleaning woman with cruel amusement, never imagining that in 3 minutes she would steal his heart and shatter his world. Welcome back to our incredible storytelling family. If you're ready to dive into a tale that will touch your heart and change how you see love, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from around the world, because tomorrow, I'm bringing you another unforgettable story of unexpected romance and second chances that you absolutely cannot miss. Now let's begin this beautiful journey together. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Meridian Hotel cast dancing shadows across marble floors worth more than most people's homes. In the opulent ballroom, Dubai's elite mingled beneath golden archways, their conversations a symphony of languages and currencies. Designer gowns swept past handcrafted Italian shoes, while the soft clink of champagne glasses punctuated discussions of oil prices and real estate ventures. Rashid Al Mansouri stood at the center of it all, his custom-tailored Armani suit fitting his 6-foot frame like liquid obsidian. At 34, he commanded respect through sheer presence, broad shoulders that had never known physical labor, hands that had only ever signed checks, and dark eyes that appraised everything and everyone for their monetary value. His black hair was perfectly styled, not a strand daring to rebel against the expensive pomade that held it in place. Another successful quarter. Rashid, his business partner Hassan clinked their glasses. The London acquisition alone will net us 40 million. Rashid's smile was practiced, polished. Money has a way of multiplying when you know where to place it. His English carried the subtle accent of British boarding schools mixed with Arabic inflections, each word carefully measured. Yet beneath his confident exterior, something restless stirred, a hollow ache that no amount of zeros in his bank account could fill. He surveyed the room with the detached interest of a man who had everything and felt nothing. These people, his people, moved through life like beautiful chess pieces on an endless board. They spoke of passion, but their hearts beat to the rhythm of profit margins. They claimed to love, but their marriages were mergers, their children future board members. 20 floors below, in the hotel's service corridors where marble gave way to practical tile, Nia Washington pushed her cleaning cart with quiet efficiency. Her dark skin glistened with perspiration despite the air conditioning, and her uniform, a simple gray dress that had seen better days, couldn't diminish the natural grace in her movements. At 28, she possessed a dancer's posture even while emptying trash bins, her spine straight and steps deliberate. Her hands, calloused from years of scrubbing and polishing, moved with practiced rhythm as she restocked towels in the executive washroom. These same hands had once been soft, manicured, adorned with her grandmother's silver ring. Now they told stories of survival, of choices made when dreams collided with reality. "Nia, honey, you need to head upstairs," called Mrs. Chen, the housekeeping supervisor, her voice carrying the weight of 20 years managing cleaning staff. "They need extra hands for the Al Mansouri event. Rich folks always make the biggest messes." Nia nodded, tucking a rebellious curl back into her hairnet. She'd learned long ago that invisibility was her superpower in places like this. The wealthy looked through her as if she were furniture, functional, necessary, but hardly human. It stung less now than it used to. As she rode the service elevator upward, Nia closed her eyes and let muscle memory guide her feet into a subtle tango step. 1 2 3 1 2 3. The rhythm lived in her bones, a secret language her body spoke fluently despite years of silence. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory, "Mija, when you dance, you are completely yourself. Never let them take that from you." The elevator dinged, and reality crashed back. She straightened her shoulders, grabbed her supplies, and stepped into a world where she existed only in the periphery. Back in the ballroom, Rashid found himself increasingly bored by conversations about market volatility and yacht specifications. His gaze wandered to the service staff moving like shadows along the walls, invisible hands maintaining the illusion of perfection. He'd never really noticed them before. They were simply part of the machinery that kept his world functioning. "Gentlemen," Hassan raised his voice above the chatter, "I believe it's time for some entertainment. The hotel has arranged for tango dancers to perform." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd as the lights dimmed, and a small stage area was cleared. Rashid watched with mild interest as two professional dancers took their positions, a man in a sharp black suit and a woman in a flowing red dress. The music began, sultry and commanding, and the dancers moved as if connected by invisible strings. Their bodies told a story of passion and surrender, of leading and following, of two souls becoming one through movement. For a moment something stirred in Rashid's chest, a longing he couldn't name, a hunger that had nothing to do with food or money or power. The performance ended to enthusiastic applause, and the dancers bowed gracefully before disappearing into the crowd. The spell broken, conversations resumed about quarterly projections and investment opportunities. It was then that Rashid noticed her. A cleaning woman had entered through a side door, her cart laden with fresh linens. She moved with an odd fluidity that caught his attention, her steps unconsciously matching the fading rhythm of the tango music still playing softly in the background. Something about her posture, the way she held her head, sparked a cruel idea in his mind. "Hassan," he said, his voice carrying the lazy confidence of a man accustomed to entertainment at others' expense, "I believe I have an idea for some additional amusement." The seeds of mockery were planted, but destiny, it seemed, had other plans entirely. The professional dancers had barely cleared the stage when Rashid's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade wrapped in silk. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, stepping forward with the casual arrogance of a man who had never been denied anything, "I believe we deserve a more interactive form of entertainment." The conversations died as all eyes turned to him. Rashid thrived under attention, his smile predatory as he gestured toward Nia, who had frozen mid-step near the service entrance. "You there, with the cleaning cart." Nia's heart hammered against her ribs, every instinct screamed at her to disappear, to blend into the wallpaper as she had perfected over years of service work. But something in his tone, the casual cruelty wrapped in expensive vowels, made her spine straighten instead of curve. "Yes, you," Rashid continued, his voice carrying easily across the marble expanse. "Come here." The ballroom held its collective breath. Some guests looked uncomfortable, others intrigued by the unexpected theater unfolding before them. Hassan placed a cautioning hand on Rashid's arm, but was brushed away with casual dismissal. Nia's hands trembled slightly as she released her grip on the cart handle. Each step toward the center of the room felt like walking through quicksand, the weight of dozens of stairs pressing down on her shoulders. She kept her chin up, drawing on her grandmother's voice. "Dignity, Mia. They can take your money, your comfort, even your dreams, but your dignity, that belongs to you alone." "What's your name?" Rashid asked when she stood before him, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, bergamot and cedar, the scent of money and privilege. "Nia Washington, sir." Her voice was steady despite the earthquake in her chest. "Well, Nia Washington," he drawled, circling her like a predator studying prey, "I couldn't help but notice how you move. Almost like you think you're a dancer." The crowd chuckled, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "So here's my proposition. Dance tango with me, right here, right now, and if you can impress these fine people, I'll marry you." The laughter erupted in waves, cruel and consuming. Some guests covered their mouths in mock horror at the audacity, others openly guffawed at the absurdity. The professional dancers watched from the sidelines, their faces carefully neutral. Nia felt heat flood her cheeks, but not from embarrassment, from rage. Pure, crystalline fury that someone would turn her existence into sport for his boredom. She looked at Rashid, really looked at him, and saw past the designer suit to the hollow man beneath. Lonely. desperate for amusement because his life held no real joy. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. Rashid's smile widened. "Then you return to your cart, and we all pretend this amusing little interruption never happened. But surely you're not afraid of a simple dance?" The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Nia closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Two. In that darkness, she heard the whisper of music her body remembered, felt her grandmother's hands guiding her hips, saw her reflection in the dance studio mirrors before life forced her to choose survival over dreams. When she opened her eyes, something had shifted. The terrified cleaning woman was gone, replaced by someone who remembered what it felt like to fly. "I accept," she said, her voice carrying a new resonance that made several guests lean forward. Rashid blinked, surprised. He had expected cowering, maybe tears, certainly refusal. This quiet acceptance threw him off balance. "Excellent. Music," he called to the band. The tango melody began again, slower this time, more intimate. Rashid extended his hand with theatrical flourish, expecting awkwardness, anticipating the humiliation that would justify his cruelty. Nia stepped forward and placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot up Rashid's arm. Her hand was work-worn but sure, her grip firm and confident. She positioned herself in the classic tango embrace with fluid precision, her left hand finding his shoulder, her body maintaining the perfect distance, close enough to move as one, far enough to maintain the tension that made tango breathe. "Ready?" she asked, and her voice held notes he'd never heard before, husky, confident, alive. The music swelled and Nia began to move. What happened next defied every assumption, every cruel expectation. She didn't stumble or fumble or provide the embarrassing spectacle Rashid had orchestrated. Instead, she transformed. Her body became liquid poetry, each step a brushstroke painting desire across the marble floor. She led when he faltered, followed when he found his rhythm, and somehow made him a man who had taken exactly 3 dancing lessons in his privileged life, look like he belonged in her world of artistry and passion. The crowd fell silent, their laughter dying as beauty replaced mockery. Nia spun in Rashid's arms, her gray uniform dress flaring like a dancer's skirt, her hair escaping its constraints to frame her face in soft curls. Her eyes were closed, lost in the music, and for these precious minutes, she wasn't invisible anymore, she was incandescent. Rashid found himself mesmerized by her transformation. This wasn't the timid woman who had approached his cruel summons. This was a goddess who happened to be wearing a cleaning uniform, a master artist who had been hiding in plain sight. Her movements spoke languages he didn't know he wanted to understand, told stories that made his chest ache with unnamed longing. As the music built to its crescendo, Nia opened her eyes and looked directly at him. What he saw there stole his breath, not gratitude or submission, but pity. She pitied him. This woman who cleaned his world's messes felt sorry for the man who owned everything and understood nothing. The final notes faded into silence so complete that the sound of Rashid's heartbeat seemed to echo off the crystal chandeliers. Then, slowly, one person began to applaud, then another. Then the entire ballroom erupted in genuine, thunderous appreciation for what they had witnessed, not mockery, but transcendence. Nia stepped back, smoothed her uniform and curtsied with the grace of a prima ballerina acknowledging her audience. When she straightened, she looked at Rashid one more time, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for the dance, sir," she said simply. Then she turned and walked back to her cart, leaving Rashid standing alone in the center of the room, surrounded by applause but feeling more isolated than ever before. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement over what they'd witnessed, Rashid remained frozen in place, staring at the spot where she had stood. Something fundamental had shifted in his universe, and he didn't yet understand what it meant. He only knew that he needed to understand the woman who had just shown him what his life was missing. The applause had faded, but its echo seemed to reverberate through Rashid's skull as he stood motionless on the marble floor. Around him, conversations resumed with animated energy. Everyone wanted to discuss what they had witnessed, dissect the impossible beauty that had unfolded before their eyes. "Extraordinary," breathed Mrs. Alzara, a prominent socialite known for her cutting tongue. "Absolutely extraordinary. Who would have thought?" "Did you see the way she moved?" Hassan whispered to a small group, like she was born for it. But Rashid heard none of it. His world had contracted to a single point of focus, the woman now calmly replacing towels at the bar service station, as if she hadn't just rewritten the laws of his universe 3 minutes ago. This couldn't be happening. Not to him. Not because of her. "Rashid?" Hassan appeared at his elbow, concern creasing his features. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Don't be ridiculous," Rashid snapped, his voice sharper than intended. He straightened his tie with jerky movements, trying to resurrect his composure. "It was just a dance. An amusing distraction, nothing more." But even as he spoke the words, they tasted like ash. His hands still tingled from where she had touched them, and his body retained the muscle memory of moving in perfect synchronization with hers. The way she had looked at him in that final moment, with pity not admiration, burned in his chest like acid. Of course Hassan agreed, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Though I must say for a cleaning woman, she was remarkably lucky." Rashid cut him off. "She got lucky, probably took a few classes somewhere. It means nothing." He strode toward the bar with forced casualness, accepting a whiskey, with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. The amber liquid burned his throat, but it couldn't chase away the memory of her grace, her strength, her impossible transformation from invisible servant to luminous artist. Across the room, Nia methodically folded linens with the same precision she had brought to the Tango. Her movements were controlled, mechanical, but her mind was chaos. What had she done? What had she been thinking, revealing herself like that? She had worked so hard to remain invisible, to survive in spaces where she wasn't wanted by never giving anyone reason to notice her. Now she could feel eyes on her from every corner of the ballroom. Whispers followed her like smoke, and she caught fragments of conversation that made her skin crawl. "That's quite talented for someone of her station. To wonder where she learned to move like that. But rather presumptuous, don't you think?" The last comment came from a group of women near the champagne fountain, their voices carrying the particular poison of those who had never worked a day in their lives. Nia's jaw clenched, but she kept her head down and continued her tasks. "Excuse me." The voice was familiar, smooth, expensive, dangerous. Nia didn't need to look up to know that Rashid had approached her station. She could smell his cologne, feel the heat of his proximity like a furnace at her back. "Sir," she responded without turning, her voice carefully neutral. "That was unexpected," he said, and she could hear him struggling with words, searching for something that would restore his sense of superiority. "I'm curious, where did you learn to dance like that?" Nia's hands stilled on the towel she was folding. The question held undertones she recognized, the assumption that someone like her couldn't possess such skill naturally, that she must have stolen it from somewhere, learned it through charity or accident. "Does it matter?" she asked quietly, finally turning to face him. Up close, she could see that his perfectly groomed facade was slightly cracked. His dark eyes held confusion, even vulnerability, but it was wrapped in layers of defensiveness that made her heart harden rather than soften. "I'm simply trying to understand how He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. "How someone in your position acquired such training." The careful distance in his voice, "someone in your position," hit her like a slap. He couldn't even say cleaning woman's to her face, couldn't acknowledge what she was to him, a curiosity, an anomaly that disrupted his worldview. "You mean how someone like me could dare to know something beautiful?" The words came out sharper than she intended, years of accumulated slights and dismissals bleeding through her professional composure. Rashid's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "That's not what Isn't it?" Nia stepped closer, close enough that he had to look down to meet her eyes, close enough that she could see her reflection in his pupils. "You threw me into that dance, like I was your entertainment, your joke. And when it didn't go the way you planned, when I didn't humiliate myself for your amusement, now you need to understand how it's possible." "I was simply making conversation," Rashid replied, but his voice lacked conviction. The truth was, he needed to understand. Her skill, her presence, her complete lack of gratitude for his attention, none of it fit the neat categories his mind used to organize the world. "No," Nia said softly, and the quiet intensity in her voice was more cutting than any shout could have been. "You were trying to put me back in my box. The one labeled knows her place." She picked up her spray bottle and began cleaning the mirror behind the bar, her reflection multiplying into infinity. "Well, I won't fit anymore. You made sure of that when you put me on display." Rashid watched her work, frustrated by his inability to regain control of the situation. Women usually responded to his attention with flutter and gratitude. They certainly didn't challenge him with philosophical observations about social hierarchy. "I could have you fired," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. It was a weak threat born of desperation rather than genuine malice. Nia paused in her cleaning, meeting his eyes in the mirror's reflection. "You could," she agreed calmly, "but that won't change what happened here tonight. It won't erase what you saw, what everyone saw, and it won't explain why you're still standing here talking to someone you think is beneath you." The truth in her words hit him like a physical blow. Why was he still here? Why couldn't he walk away and dismiss her as easily as he dismissed everyone else who served his needs? He began, then stopped, realizing he had no answer that wouldn't reveal too much. Nia finished with the mirror and turned to face him fully. "I have work to finish, sir. Unless you need something else." The dismissal was polite but absolute. She was giving him permission to leave, to retreat to his world of familiar superiority and pretend this conversation had never happened. Instead, he found himself saying, "What's your story?" "My story?" she repeated, tilting her head slightly. "Everyone has one. I'm curious about yours." For a moment, something flickered across her features, surprise perhaps, or the faintest hint of longing. But then her professional mask slipped back into place. "My story is that I clean hotel rooms and ballrooms, sir. That's all you need to know." She gathered her supplies and moved to the next station, leaving him standing alone by the bar, holding an empty glass and a head full of questions he couldn't answer. But as she walked away, Rashid noticed something that made his pulse quicken. Despite her words, despite her dismissal, she was fighting the same battle he was. Her steps were too careful, too controlled. Her shoulders held too much tension. Whatever had happened between them on that dance floor, she felt it too, and she was just as determined as he was to pretend it meant nothing. The game, he realized, was far from over. The fire alarm pierced the ballroom's refined atmosphere like a banshee's wail, sending crystal glasses crashing to marble floors as Dubai's elite scrambled toward the exits in decidedly undignified panic. Red emergency lights bathed the opulent space in an apocalyptic glow, transforming designer gowns into crimson shrouds and casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock the evening's earlier entertainment. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," announced the hotel manager over the intercom, his voice tight with professional stress. "We're experiencing a kitchen fire in the East Wing. As a precaution, this section of the hotel is under temporary lockdown until the fire department can ensure structural safety. Emergency protocols require all occupants to remain in the ballroom until further notice." Rashid stood frozen amid the chaos, watching his carefully curated world dissolve into something raw and unpredictable. Around him, billionaires and socialites revealed their true selves, some maintaining dignity under pressure, others collapsing into entitled hysteria at the mere inconvenience. "How long?" demanded Mrs. Alzara, her perfectly applied makeup now streaked with perspiration. "I have a charity auction at the Burj Al Arab in 2 hours. "Unknown, madam. Could be 30 minutes, could be 3 hours. The fire department will determine when it's safe to evacuate." 3 hours. Trapped in this marble prison with her. Rashid's gaze swept the room until he found Nia still stationed near the service area, methodically checking emergency supplies with the other staff. While his social circle devolved into complaints and dramatic sighs, she moved with quiet efficiency, distributing water bottles, helping elderly guests to comfortable seating, somehow managing to remain invisible despite having been the evening's most memorable performer. The irony wasn't lost on him. In a crisis, the cleaning woman was the only one actually cleaning up problems while the powerful demanded solutions from others. "Rashid darling," purred Valentina Kozlov, a Russian oil heiress who had been pursuing him for months. She pressed against his arm with calculated intimacy, her emerald dress clinging like a second skin. "Perhaps we could make the best of this dreadful situation. Find a quiet corner and talk." Her invitation was anything but subtle, and normally he might have been intrigued. Valentina was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, perfectly crafted, flawlessly maintained, utterly predictable, but tonight her painted perfection felt hollow compared to the raw authenticity he had witnessed on the dance floor. "I need some air," he murmured, extracting himself from her grip and moving toward the far side of the ballroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Dubai's glittering skyline. He didn't consciously plan to end up near the service station where Nia worked. It simply happened as if some magnetic force drew him across the room. She was alone now, the other staff members having dispersed to manage various guest needs, carefully arranging emergency medical supplies on a side table. "Efficient as always," he said, attempting casual conversation. Nia didn't look up from her task. "Someone has to be." "Is that a commentary on my social circle?" "I don't make commentaries about people who sign my paychecks, sir." The sirs stung more than any insult could have. It was a wall built of professionalism and self-preservation, designed to keep him at a distance, but he had seen behind that wall during their dance, glimpsed the fire that burned beneath her careful composure. "We could be here for hours," he said, settling into a nearby chair without invitation. "Surely we can speak as human beings rather than employer and employee. Can we?" Nia finally looked at him, her dark eyes unreadable. "Because 30 minutes ago you made it very clear what you think of me as a human being." That was he struggled for words that wouldn't sound like excuses. "I made a mistake." "No," she said quietly, returning to her supplies. "You revealed who you are. There's a difference." The accusation hung between them like smoke from the distant fire. Rashid felt something crack in his chest, not his pride, which he had expected, but something deeper, something that recognized the truth in her words and recoiled from it. "You're right," he said, the admission tasting foreign on his tongue. "I am exactly what you think I am. Entitled, cruel when it amuses me. Someone who treats people like entertainment." Nia's hands stilled, surprised by his honesty. But he continued, leaning forward in his chair. "I can't stop thinking about what happened out there. The way you moved, the way you transformed. I've never seen anything like it." "You mean you've never bothered to look before?" "Probably not." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting its careful arrangement. "I live in a bubble where everyone wants something from me. My money, my connections, my name. People perform for me constantly, but it's always hollow, calculated. What you did tonight was real?" she suggested, finally setting down the supplies and giving him her full attention. "Alive," he said. "Completely, impossibly alive." For a moment, the careful distance between them wavered. Nia saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected, genuine wonder mixed with confusion, as if he'd discovered a new color and didn't know what to call it. "That's what dance is," she said softly. "Being alive, being honest with your body when your words can't find the truth. Where did you learn? And don't tell me it doesn't matter, I genuinely want to know." Nia studied his face, searching for the mockery or condescension she had learned to expect. Instead, she found curiosity that seemed authentic, almost vulnerable. "My grandmother," she said finally. "Elena Washington. She was a professional dancer in New York before she married my grandfather and moved to Detroit. Classical ballet, modern, but tango was her passion. She said it was the dance of equals, no matter who leads, both partners have power." "What happened to your dancing?" The question opened a door to pain she usually kept locked. "Life happened. Grandmother died when I was 22. I was in my final year of dance school, but the medical bills," she shrugged, the gesture carrying the weight of dreams deferred. "Someone had to take care of the debts. Dance is a luxury. Cleaning pays rent." Rashid felt something twist in his stomach, an emotion he rarely experienced and didn't entirely recognize. Shame, perhaps, mixed with something that might have been admiration. She had sacrificed her dreams for responsibility, while he had everything handed to him and still felt empty. "Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. Every day, she admitted, then seemed surprised by her own honesty. But missing something and being able to change it are different things. What if they weren't? The question slipped out before he could examine it, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to explore. Nia looked at him sharply, searching his face for meaning. "What are you saying?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But being trapped here, talking to you like this, it's the first honest conversation I've had in years." Before Nia could respond, the hotel manager's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received an update from the fire department. The lockdown will continue for at least another 2 hours. We're distributing blankets and additional refreshments. Thank you for your patience." 2 more hours, in this marble fishbowl, with nowhere to hide from the questions she raised in his mind, or the answers he was afraid to examine. Nia seemed to reach the same realization. "We should probably try to maintain some distance," she said, standing and gathering her supplies. "People are already talking about what happened earlier. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who needs this job." She was right, and they both knew it. But as she moved away to check on elderly guests, Rashid couldn't shake the feeling that distance was the last thing either of them actually wanted. Outside, Dubai sparkled in the darkness, beautiful and cold as diamonds. Inside, 2 people from different worlds found themselves trapped together, circling each other like dancers unsure of the steps, but unable to stop moving to music only they could hear. What's a dream you've had to sacrifice for responsibility? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes our biggest struggles lead to unexpected blessings. An hour into their confinement, the ballroom had settled into an uneasy rhythm. The initial panic had faded into resigned acceptance, with guests clustering in small groups, some attempting to maintain social facades while others had abandoned pretense entirely. The emergency lighting cast everything in harsh relief, stripping away the romantic ambiance and revealing the space as what it truly was, an elaborate cage. Rashid found himself gravitating toward Nia, despite her earlier warning about distance. She had claimed a small section near the windows where she was helping Mrs. Pemberton, an elderly British expatriate who suffered from diabetes and needed monitoring. "There now, Mrs. Pemberton," Nia said gently, checking the woman's pulse with practiced ease. "Your sugar levels should stabilize soon. Just keep sipping the orange juice slowly." "You're very kind, dear," the elderly woman murmured. "Are you a nurse as well as a dancer?" Nia's smile faltered slightly. "No, ma'am, just experience with medical situations." Rashid settled into a nearby chair, close enough to overhear, but far enough to avoid seeming intrusive. He watched Nia work, her gentle touch, her calm competence, the way she anticipated Mrs. Pemberton's needs before they were voiced. Everything about her movements spoke of someone accustomed to caring for others. "My late husband had diabetes," Nia explained, adjusting Mrs. Pemberton's position on the makeshift bed of hotel cushions. "I learned to recognize the signs." "How thoughtful. He was lucky to have you." "I was the lucky one," Nia replied, her voice carrying a wistfulness that made Rashid lean closer. He was everything good about the world wrapped up in one person. Marcus. The name hit Rashid like a physical blow, though he couldn't explain why. Jealousy was a foreign emotion to him. He was accustomed to having whatever he desired, when he desired it. But the tenderness in Nia's voice when she spoke of her husband created a hollow ache in his chest. Mrs. Pemberton had drifted off to sleep, leaving Nia to monitor her quietly. She seemed lost in memory, her fingers unconsciously tracing patterns on her bare ring finger where a wedding band had clearly once resided. "You were married," Rashid said quietly, abandoning his pretense of casual proximity. Nia startled slightly, then nodded. "For 5 years, best 5 years of my life." "What happened to him?" She was quiet for so long that Rashid thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Leukemia. Diagnosed 3 months after our wedding." She looked up at the crystal chandeliers, their emergency lighting creating fractured rainbows. "We spent our honeymoon in a hospital room." He joked that at least the morphine made him a better dancer. Rashid felt something twist in his stomach. "I'm sorry. Everyone said I should leave. Even his own family suggested it would be understandable if I couldn't handle the medical bills, the treatments." Watching him fade away, her voice hardened slightly. They didn't understand that leaving wasn't an option. When you love someone, really love them, you don't calculate the cost. "Is that why you stopped dancing?" Nia nodded, wiping Mrs. Pemberton's forehead with a damp cloth. "Dance school doesn't pause for cancer. The medical bills ate through our savings, then our insurance, then everything we could borrow. I dropped out sophomore year and took whatever work I could find. Night shifts so I could be with him during the day, cleaning offices, hotels, anywhere that would pay cash." "For 5 years?" "For 5 years. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." She met his eyes directly, her gaze fierce. "You asked what my story was earlier. That's it. I chose love over dreams, and I've never regretted it." Rashid absorbed this information, trying to reconcile the woman before him with his assumptions about her choices. She hadn't ended up cleaning hotel rooms through lack of ambition or intelligence. She had sacrificed everything for someone she loved, then continued working to honor that love even after he was gone. "How long has he been gone?" he asked gently. 3 years, 2 months, 18 days. The precision of her answer revealed how closely she counted time without him. "Long enough that I should probably stop introducing myself as a widow, but not long enough that it feels dishonest." The raw honesty in her words created an intimacy between them that had nothing to do with their earlier dance and everything to do with shared humanity. Rashid found himself wanting to tell her things he'd never spoken aloud, about his own loneliness, his parents' arranged marriage that had taught him to view love as a transaction, his growing certainty that he was fundamentally incapable of the kind of devotion she described. "You said love doesn't calculate cost," he said carefully. "But what if you've never learned how to love without calculating? What if you've been raised to see every relationship as a negotiation?" Nia studied his face, seeing past the expensive veneer to something vulnerable underneath. "Are you asking hypothetically?" "No," he admitted. "I'm asking because I've watched my parents treat their marriage like a business merger for 34 years. Because every woman I've ever dated wanted something from me: status, money, connections. Because I honestly don't know if I'm capable of what you describe." The confession hung between them like a bridge. Neither was sure they should cross. Around them, the ballroom hummed with quiet conversations, the rustle of expensive fabric, the soft sound of Mrs. Pemberton's breathing. "My grandmother used to say that love isn't something you're good at," Nia said finally. "It's something you choose to be brave enough to try. The capacity is there in everyone. Some people just build higher walls around it." "What if the walls are made of gold?" She almost smiled at that. "Gold is soft metal. It bends if you apply the right pressure." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the main doors. Hassan was arguing with the hotel manager, his voice carrying across the marble space. "This is unacceptable. Do you have any idea who these people are? The business interests represented in this room? Sir, I understand your frustration, but the fire department won't clear the adjacent structures until then get us better accommodations. Private suites. Anything but this fishbowl." Rashid watched the display with growing embarrassment. Hassan was revealing exactly the kind of entitled attitude that Nia had accused him of embodying, the assumption that wealth should insulate them from inconvenience, that their comfort mattered more than safety protocols. "Your friend seems upset," Nia observed. "Hassan isn't comfortable when he can't control situations." "And you are?" Rashid considered the question seriously. "I'm discovering that there are some things worth being uncomfortable for." As if sensing his scrutiny, Hassan spotted Rashid and strode over, his designer shoes clicking against marble like castanets. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere. The manager says they might have some VIP suites available on the upper floors away from this chaos. Interested?" Rashid glanced at Nia, who had turned her attention back to Mrs. Pemberton, her body language clearly dismissing him from her concerns. The old Rashid would have leaped at the chance for privacy and comfort. The new Rashid, the one who was still forming in the space between his assumptions and her truths, found himself hesitating. "I'll stay," he said quietly. Hassan's eyebrows shot up. "Stay? In this emergency shelter situation? Why on earth would you?" His gaze fell on Nia, and understanding dawned in his eyes. "I see." The knowing smirk on Hassan's face made Rashid's jaw clench. "It's not what you think." "Of course not." Hassan's tone suggested the opposite. "Well, enjoy your humanitarian work. I'll be in the penthouse suite if you come to your senses." As Hassan departed with several other guests who had opted for upgraded accommodations, the ballroom felt both larger and more intimate. Fewer people meant more space, but also fewer barriers between Rashid and the woman who was systematically dismantling everything he thought he knew about himself. "You could have gone," Nia said without looking at him. "I know. Why didn't you?" Rashid looked out at Dubai's skyline, searching for an answer that wouldn't reveal too much or too little. "Maybe I'm tired of running away to more comfortable cages." When Nia finally met his gaze, he saw something different in her eyes. Not pity this time, but possibility, as if she was beginning to consider that the walls around his heart might indeed be made of softer metal than they appeared. Outside, dawn was still hours away, but something new was beginning to emerge in the space between them, fragile as spun glass but undeniably real. The clock on the ballroom wall showed 2:47 a.m. when the emergency lighting finally stabilized, casting the marble space in a warmer, less harsh glow. Most of the remaining guests had succumbed to exhaustion, curled up on makeshift beds of hotel linens and designer coats. The quiet was broken only by soft snoring, the distant hum of ventilation systems, and the occasional murmur from those still too wired to sleep. Rashid sat in the chair he'd claimed hours ago, watching Nia tend to Mrs. Pemberton with tireless devotion. The elderly woman had been stable for the past hour, but Nia continued checking her pulse every 15 minutes, adjusting her makeshift pillow, ensuring she stayed comfortable. "You should rest," he said softly. "I can watch her for a while." Nia looked up, surprised. "You know how to monitor someone with diabetes?" "No," he admitted, "but I can learn." You've been taking care of everyone else all night." There was something in his voice, genuine concern rather than polite offer, that made her pause. She studied his face in the dim lighting, noting the exhaustion he was trying to hide, the way his usually perfect posture had relaxed into something more human. "When did you last eat?" she asked. "I don't remember. This afternoon, maybe?" Without a word, Nia reached into her small supply kit and retrieved a granola bar, one of the emergency rations she'd been distributing earlier. She unwrapped it and handed him half. "Thank you," he said, accepting the simple offering. The granola was basic, probably cost less than what he usually spent on coffee, but sharing it felt more intimate than any five-star meal he'd ever consumed. They ate in comfortable silence, two people finding unexpected peace in the midst of chaos. When Mrs. Pemberton stirred slightly, both of them leaned forward instinctively, but she settled back into sleep without incident. "Tell me about your dance," Rashid said quietly. "Not the practical part, the loss, the sacrifice. Tell me about the joy of it." Nia was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust him with something precious. When she spoke, her voice carried a dreamlike quality. "My grandmother used to say that dance was conversation with the divine. When I was little, I thought that was just poetry, old woman nonsense." She smiled, her eyes distant. "But when I was on that floor tonight moving with you, for 3 minutes, I remembered what she meant." "What did it feel like?" "Like coming home to myself. Like remembering who I was before life taught me to be smaller." She looked at him directly. "What did it feel like for you?" Rashid considered the question seriously. "Terrifying. Like jumping off a cliff and discovering I could fly, but not understanding how or why." "You're a better dancer than you think." "I'm a better person when I'm with you than I thought possible." The words slipped out before he could catch them, raw and unfiltered. In the silence that followed, he waited for her to laugh, to dismiss the sentiment, to retreat behind professional distance. Instead, she said quietly, "That's not me. That's you choosing to let something real show through." "I don't think I know how to be real anymore. If I ever did. Everyone knows how. Some people just forget, or get scared, or build walls so high they can't see over them anymore." "What made you brave enough to dance with me? Really dance, not just go through the motions to end the humiliation?" Nia leaned back in her chair, considering. "Marcus used to say that dignity isn't something people can give you or take away, it's something you carry inside. When you challenged me tonight, I could have let you make me small. Instead, I decided to be magnificent." She met his eyes. It felt good to be magnificent again. Even for a few minutes. "You were magnificent. You are magnificent." The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in her chest, a feeling she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it existed. Hope, maybe, or the distant memory of what it felt like to be seen as more than the sum of her circumstances. "Rashid," she said, testing his name on her tongue for the first time, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you really stay tonight? Hassan was right. You could have been comfortable upstairs. So why choose this?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Because in 34 years of living, this is the first time I've felt genuinely curious about another human being. Not what they could do for me, not what they represented or possessed, but who they actually were." He ran his hand through his disheveled hair. "You make me want to be worthy of the way you see the world." "How do I see the world?" "Like it's full of possibilities, like people are worth believing in, even when they disappoint you. Like love is something real, instead of something performed." Nia felt tears threaten, not sad tears, but the overwhelming kind that came from being truly understood by another person. Marcus saw the world that way too. "Were you happy? Really happy? Deliriously, completely, impossibly happy?" Even in the hospital rooms, even during the worst days, we had something that couldn't be bought or negotiated or strategized. It just was. I want that, he said quietly. I want to know what that feels like. It's terrifying, she warned. Love makes you vulnerable in ways money can't protect you from. Everything about tonight has been terrifying. Maybe it's time I stopped running from that. Around them, the ballroom held its sleeping occupants like a marble cocoon. In a few hours, the fire department would clear the area, the lockdown would end, and they would return to their separate worlds, his of private jets and board meetings, hers of service corridors and invisible labor. But for now, in this stolen moment between crisis and resolution, two people sat in the soft darkness and shared something neither had expected to find: the possibility that love might be worth the risk, that connection might bridge any gap, that sometimes the most profound transformations began with a single dance. Mrs. Pemberton stirred in her sleep, murmuring something incoherent. Without thinking, both Rashid and Nia reached out to adjust her blanket, their hands brushing in the darkness. Neither pulled away immediately, letting the simple contact linger, not romantic, not sexual, just human touch acknowledging human connection. Whatever happens when we leave here, Nia said softly, thank you for seeing me tonight. Really seeing me. Thank you for showing me what I've been missing. Dawn was still hours away, but something new had been born in the space between them, fragile but growing stronger, like the first green shoots pushing through concrete toward light. The ballroom had become a sanctuary of soft breathing and whispered dreams when everything shattered at 4:23 a.m. Hassan's voice cut through the peaceful darkness like a blade through silk, his designer shoes clicking against marble with military precision. Behind him, three men in expensive suits moved with the calculated grace of corporate sharks sensing blood in the water. There you are, Hassan announced, his voice carrying across the sleeping forms. I've been looking everywhere. Rashid looked up from where he sat beside Nia, their quiet conversation interrupted by the intrusion. Something cold settled in his stomach at the expression on his business partner's face, predatory satisfaction mixed with barely contained excitement. Hassan, what's going on? It's 4 a.m. Indeed it is, and do you know what's been happening while you've been playing nursemaid? Hassan's gaze flicked dismissively toward Mrs. Pemberton, then lingered on Nia with undisguised contempt. The Singapore deal, the one worth 43 million euros, it's collapsing. The words hit Rashid like ice water. The Singapore acquisition had been 18 months in the making, a luxury resort chain that would cement their position in the Asian market. What do you mean collapsing? Lichwi called an emergency meeting for 6 a.m. Dubai time. Apparently he's having second thoughts about our stabilities as partners. Hassan's smile was razor sharp. Can you imagine why? One of the suited men stepped forward, Jenkins, their head of public relations, his face grim. Sir, there's been some unfortunate social media activity tonight. He produced a tablet, its screen glowing obscenely bright in the dim ballroom. The image on display made Rashid's blood freeze, a video of their dance shot from multiple angles, already viral across Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire's bizarre mating ritual. When money can't buy class, rich man humiliates service worker. Arab elite's cruel joke backfires spectacularly. But worse were the comments, thousands of them dissecting every moment, every expression, turning what had felt transcendent into a carnival of speculation and judgment. It gets worse, Jenkins continued, swiping to reveal more coverage. Someone leaked your identity, and hers. The hotel staff are talking. There are photos of you two sitting together during the lockdown, looking rather intimate. Nia had gone completely still beside him, her face a mask of controlled devastation as she absorbed the implications. She was being dissected by strangers, reduced to hashtags and hot takes, her private moment of triumph turned into public spectacle. Li Wei's people are calling it a concerning lack of professional judgment, Hassan continued. They're questioning whether someone who makes such impulsive decisions can be trusted with their family's legacy properties. The Singapore deal wasn't just about money, it was about reputation, legacy, the empire Rashid had spent a decade building. Losing it would set him back years, possibly destroy his standing in the international luxury market. "This is fixable," Rashid said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We can spin this, explain the context." "Can we?" Hassan's voice dripped venom. "Can we explain why the CEO of Al Mansouri Enterprises was caught on camera dancing with the help? Can we make Li Wei understand why you chose to play Prince Charming instead of closing the biggest deal of your career?" Each word was a calculated strike, designed to resurrect every class prejudice, every social conditioning that had shaped Rashid's worldview since birth. And despite everything that had passed between them tonight, Rashid felt those old patterns reasserting themselves like muscle memory. "It was just a dance," he said weakly. "Just a dance?" Hassan's laugh was cruel. "Rashid, look around you. Look at what your just a dance has cost us. The Singapore deal, your reputation, the respect of every serious investor in the Gulf." Nia stood quietly, her dignity intact despite the chaos swirling around her. "I should go," she said simply. "Let you handle your business." "Yes," Hassan said quickly. "That would be best. In fact, I think it would be wise if you didn't speak to any reporters about tonight. Bad publicity could affect your employment prospects." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Nia's jaw tightened, but she nodded once, a small proud gesture that somehow conveyed both compliance and contempt. "Nia, wait," Rashid said standing, but Hassan grabbed his arm. "Don't make this worse than it already is. Think about what's at stake here." What was at stake? 43 million euros, years of work, his father's legacy, the empire he'd built through calculated decisions and emotional distance. "She's a cleaning woman, Rashid," Hassan continued, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "A widow with nothing to offer you but complications. Is 3 minutes of dancing really worth destroying everything you've worked for?" The words hit their mark because they echoed every lesson Rashid had ever learned about success, about power, about the price of maintaining his position in a world that devoured the weak. His father had drummed it into him from childhood. Emotion was weakness, sentiment was liability, love was a luxury that men of power couldn't afford. "The car is waiting," Hassan pressed. "We can be at the office in 20 minutes, on a call with Li Wei in 2 hours. We can salvage this if we move fast and cut ties with the distraction." The word hung in the air like poison gas. After everything they'd shared, everything he'd felt and discovered about himself, Hassan was reducing Nia to a business problem to be solved. And Rashid realized, with sickening clarity, that he was actually considering it. "Tai," he began, then stopped, looking at Nia's face. She was watching him with those dark eyes that had seen through his masks from the very beginning. She wasn't angry. Anger would have been easier to bear. Instead, she looked at him with profound sadness, as if watching someone she'd hoped might be better choose to be exactly what she'd first thought he was. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I understand. Your world, your rules." But it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. She was giving him permission to choose safety over courage, calculation over connection, the gilded cage over the terrifying freedom of authentic feeling. "Nia, your friend is right," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "I am just a cleaning woman, and you are exactly who you've always been." She turned and walked away, her spine straight and shoulders back, carrying her dignity like armor. She didn't run, didn't plead, didn't make a scene that would give his corporate sharks more ammunition. She simply removed herself from the equation with a grace that made his chest ache. Hassan's hand tightened on his arm. "Good. Now let's go fix your life." But as Rashid watched Nia disappear into the service corridor, he wondered if he'd just broken the only thing in his life that had ever been worth fixing. The ballroom felt cavernous and cold, filled with sleeping strangers and the echo of his own cowardice. Outside, Dubai glittered in the pre-dawn darkness, beautiful, wealthy, and utterly empty. Just like him. The Al Mansouri Enterprises boardroom was a temple to power, 30 floors above Dubai's streets, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows that commanded the city like a general surveys a battlefield. At 5:47 a.m. it should have been empty, but Hassan had summoned their crisis management team with military efficiency. Lawyers, publicists, and financial advisors filled the leather chairs around the mahogany table, their faces grim in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Rashid sat at the head of the table, his tie straightened, his hair restored to corporate perfection, his mask of executive authority firmly in place. But inside, he was falling apart. The preliminary damage assessment, announced Patricia Stone, their lead crisis manager, consulting her tablet with surgical precision. Stock price down 12% in pre-market trading. 3 major investors have requested clarification calls. The Singapore deal is hanging by a thread, and Li Wei wants assurances of your executive stabilities before proceeding. What kind of assurances? Rashid asked, his voice hoarse from hours of strategy sessions. A public statement distancing yourself from tonight's incident. Perhaps some charitable donation to show your commitment to appropriate employer-employee boundaries. Standard reputation rehabilitation. Charity. They wanted him to turn his connection with Nia into a tax write-off. Hassan leaned forward, his eyes bright with the fervor of crisis management. I've already drafted a statement, brief, professional, emphasizes that you were simply being gracious to hotel staff during an emergency situation. Any emotional interpretation by social media is purely projection. The words blurred on the page as Rashid tried to focus. Each sanitized phrase felt like a small betrayal, reducing the most honest 3 minutes of his life to corporate damage control. Sir? Patricia's voice cut through his mental fog. We need your approval to release this within the hour. The longer we wait, the more the narrative solidifies. Narrative. As if what had happened between him and Nia was just another story to be managed, spun, controlled, as if the way she'd looked at him with pity, then hope, then devastating disappointment, could be erased with a press release. Give me a moment, he said, standing abruptly. I need to think. Rashid, Hassan called after him, we don't have time for. I said I need a moment. The conference room fell silent. Rashid Al-Mansouri didn't raise his voice, didn't show cracks in his composure. The fact that he was doing both now sent ripples of concern through the assembled crisis team. He escaped to his private office, locking the door behind him. The space was a monument to his success, awards lining the walls, photos with world leaders, certificates of achievement from a dozen countries. But tonight, it felt like a mausoleum. His laptop sat open on the desk, still displaying the social media feeds that had started this avalanche. The videos of their dance had been shared thousands of times, each repost accompanied by commentary that ranged from cruel to clueless. But buried in the noise, he found something unexpected. Comments defending her. Defending them. She's incredible. Look at that technique. This man doesn't deserve her talent. The way she moves, pure artistry. Anyone know if she teaches? I'd pay anything to learn from her. And then, one comment that stopped his breathing entirely. I was there tonight. This wasn't mockery. You can see it in his face at 2:47. He falls in love with her in real time. It's beautiful. Falls in love. The phrase hit him like lightning, illuminating everything he'd been trying not to acknowledge. This wasn't about reputation or business deals or social expectations. This was about the terrifying, exhilarating, impossible fact that sometime between her first step into his arms and her final devastating look of disappointment, he had fallen completely, irrevocably in love. With a woman whose last name he'd only learned hours ago, whose dreams he'd helped destroy through his own cowardice, whose strength made his supposed power look like tissue paper in a hurricane. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Al-Manzouri, this is Elena Rodriguez, dance instructor at Dubai Arts Academy. I saw the video of you and Nia dancing. If she ever wants to teach here, we'd be honored. She's extraordinary. Elena. More messages followed. Dance schools, arts organizations, even a talent agent from London. Word was spreading through the dance community like wildfire, not about scandal or social boundaries, but about artistry, about a woman whose talent had been hidden in plain sight. Nia could have a different life, a better life, if someone was brave enough to offer it to her, if he was brave enough to offer it to her. Rashid looked out at Dubai's skyline, the sun beginning to paint the horizon in soft gold. In a few hours, this crisis would either be contained or escalated beyond repair. The Singapore deal would either proceed or collapse. His reputation would either recover or be permanently damaged. But all of that assumed he wanted the life those outcomes would preserve. Did he? Did he want to return to boardrooms and balance sheets, to arranged social events and calculated relationships, to the hollow existence that had felt like success until 3 hours ago? His phone rang. Hassan's name flashed on the screen. We need to move, Rashid. Li Wei's people are getting impatient. Hassan, Rashid said quietly. What if we don't release the statement? Silence. Then what are you talking about? What if instead of denying what happened, we owned it? What if I said yes, I danced with her, and it was the most real moment of my life? Have you lost your mind? The Singapore deal will survive or it won't. But I'm tired of making every decision based on what other people think I should want. Rashid, listen to me very carefully. You're having some kind of breakdown, stress, lack of sleep. It's affecting your judgment. Come back to the conference room. Let's handle this properly. Rashid looked at his reflection in the office window, expensive suit, perfect grooming, empty eyes. This was who he was supposed to be, who he'd been trained to be from birth. But who was he when he wasn't performing? Who was he when he stopped calculating and started feeling? He was a man who had found something precious and thrown it away for the approval of people he didn't even respect. A man who had chosen fear over love, safety over truth, reputation over the chance to become someone worthy of a woman who danced like angels and loved like heroes. Hassan, he said finally, cancel the statement, cancel the Li Wei call, cancel everything. Rashid, I'm done hiding. He hung up the phone and looked out at the city waking up below him. Somewhere in those streets, Nia was probably returning home from the longest night of her life, believing herself abandoned by yet another person who had claimed to see her worth. He had a choice to make, the safe choice, or the right choice, the choice that preserved his empire, or the choice that might actually give his life meaning. For the first time in 34 years, Rashid Al-Manzouri chose love. Have you ever taken a leap of faith for love? Tell us in the comments about the biggest risk you've taken for someone who mattered. We'd love to hear your stories of courage and connection. Nia's apartment was a study in dignified simplicity, a one-bedroom space in Dubai's older district, where expatriate workers carved out lives between the gleaming towers of wealth. The walls held photographs of her grandmother, her late husband Marcus, and a single framed image of herself in dance costume from her university days, radiant with dreams she'd thought were buried forever. She sat at her small kitchen table, still wearing her hotel uniform, staring at her phone as notifications poured in like a digital avalanche. The dance video had gone viral beyond anything she could have imagined, but the attention felt like standing naked in a snowstorm, exposed and freezing. Most of the comments were what she'd expected: speculation about her motives, jokes about social climbing, cruel observations about her appearance and background. But buried in the noise were messages that made her heart ache with possibility. Your technique is flawless. Have you considered teaching? I'm a choreographer in London, would love to discuss opportunities. You made me cry. Dance is supposed to be about joy, and you have so much of it. Her phone rang, startling her from the hypnotic scroll of notifications, an unknown Dubai number. Hello? Miss Washington? This is Amira Hassan from the Dubai Cultural Foundation. I hope you don't mind me calling so early, but I had to reach out after seeing your performance last night. Nia's pulse quickened. The Cultural Foundation was one of the city's most prestigious arts organizations. What can I do for you? Actually, it's what we'd like to do for you. We're launching a new community outreach program bringing dance education to underserved communities. After what I witnessed last night, I can't think of anyone better suited to lead it. The position comes with a full salary, benefits, and performance opportunities. Would you be interested in discussing it? The words seemed to float in the air like soap bubbles, too beautiful to be real, too fragile to trust. Are you serious? Completely. Your story, your talent, your dignity under pressure, you represent everything we want this program to embody. Could we meet later today? Yes, I'd like that very much. After hanging up, Nia sat in stunned silence. One dance had somehow opened doors she'd thought were sealed forever, but even as hope bloomed in her chest, she couldn't shake the memory of disappointment in Rashid's eyes when his business partner had arrived. The way he'd retreated into corporate mode, choosing his empire over the fragile connection they'd built. She understood, she'd always understood that their worlds were incompatible, but for a few hours, she'd allowed herself to believe that maybe love could bridge any gap, that maybe authentic connection mattered more than social boundaries. She'd been wrong before, she'd survive being wrong again. A knock at her door interrupted her melancholy, probably Mrs. Chen with another shift assignment, or perhaps a reporter who'd tracked down her address. She opened the door expecting intrusion. Instead, she found Rashid Al-Manzouri standing in her hallway, still wearing his expensive suit but looking utterly undone. His perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and his dark eyes held a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "You came," she said, too surprised for politeness or pretense. "I needed to see you, to tell you," he stopped, seeming to gather courage, "to tell you that I made the biggest mistake of my life in that ballroom. You did what anyone in your position would have done, protected your interests." "No," he said firmly, stepping closer. "I did what a coward would do, what someone who'd forgotten how to be human would do." He ran a hand through his hair, destroying what remained of his corporate perfection. "Do you know what I've been doing for the past 3 hours? Sitting in boardrooms listening to people tell me how to spin what happened between us into acceptable narrative, how to turn the most honest moment of my life into a public relations problem. And I walked out. I told them I was done hiding, done pretending that connection was weakness, done choosing safety over the chance to be worthy of someone extraordinary." Nia's heart began to hammer against her ribs. "Rashid, what are you saying?" "I'm saying the Singapore deal can go to hell. I'm saying my reputation isn't worth the cost of losing you. I'm saying that I'd rather be poor and real with you than rich and empty without you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "I've been making calls all morning. Dance schools, arts organizations, cultural foundations. Your phone's probably been ringing non-stop. How did you? Because you're brilliant, and talented people recognize talent when they see it. Because what you did last night wasn't just beautiful, it was transformative. For me, for everyone who witnessed it, for everyone who's seen that video, and remembered what it means to be truly alive." He handed her the paper. "Elena Rodriguez at the Dubai Arts Academy wants to offer you a position, full-time instructor with performance opportunities, and a salary that will let you dance instead of clean. But that's just the beginning. London, New York, Paris, everyone wants to meet the woman who can turn a cruel joke into transcendent art." Nia unfolded the document with trembling hands. An official offer letter, more money than she'd ever imagined, a chance to return to the world she'd thought was lost forever. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because I love you," he said simply. "Because 3 minutes of dancing with you taught me more about being human than 34 years of existing in a gilded cage. Because you make me want to be the man you saw in me during those moments when I forgot to be afraid." Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming recognition that sometimes, impossibly, fairy tales could be real. "The world will say we don't make sense together," she said. "Let them. I'm done living my life according to what other people think makes sense. Your business empire will survive or it won't. But I know now that success without love is just expensive loneliness, and I've been lonely enough for several lifetimes." Nia looked at the offer letter, then at the man who had somehow transformed from antagonist to advocate in the span of a single night. "What happens now?" "Now," Rashid said, stepping closer until he could cup her face in his hands, "you teach me how to dance, really dance. Not the corporate choreography I've been performing my whole life, but the kind of dancing that comes from the heart. And then we see where the music takes us." He leaned down and kissed her, soft and tentative at first, then with growing certainty. It tasted like promises and possibilities, like morning coffee and second chances. When they broke apart, Nia smiled. The first genuine smile she'd worn since Marcus's death, full of joy and hope, and the radical belief that love could indeed conquer any obstacle. "Dance with me," she whispered, the same words that had started their journey. This time, when Rashid took her hand, it wasn't performance or spectacle or social commentary. It was simply two people who had found each other in the space between one song and the next, choosing to move together toward whatever music the future might hold. Outside, Dubai sparkled in the morning sun, beautiful and vast and full of infinite possibilities for those brave enough to dance. And in a small apartment where dreams had learned to bloom again, a billionaire and a cleaning woman began the most important dance of their lives, not for an audience but for each other, not for show but for love, not for a moment but for always. The music played on, and they danced, and the world outside could say whatever it wanted. They had found each other, and that was more than enough.
The end. This emotional journey from mockery to love, from prejudice to understanding, shows how authentic connection can bridge any social divide. Rashid learned that true wealth lies in genuine human connection, while Nia discovered that her dreams were never truly lost, just waiting for the right moment to resurface. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Thank you for watching this story to the end.